friends, my name is Aisling and as ever I'm here today to talk about books. So this week I'm gonna do a little bit of a reading vlog, but what I'm quite excited about is, well, this first part I'm not that excited about. So it is my birthday on the 24th of this month, and what kind of baffles me is that I'm turning 34 years old, which is mad because everybody tells you that as you age you never really get past feeling like a really young person, like somebody like in your kind of early 20s or whatever, and they're dead right. I feel like I'm still stuck in my 20s a little bit. I'm not, and that's okay, because isn't it a privilege to age, to get older, to still be here when so many people don't have that privilege? And life's not perfect, but here we are, and there are such lovely, wonderful, fleeting moments of joy that we get to experience in, if not our everyday, in general, just our waking lives. And I am really grateful to still be here, to appreciate some of the things that maybe I never appreciated when I was a little bit younger. So my idea for this reading vlog, so as I said, I'm turning 34 in a couple of weeks, and it gets you thinking about who you were when you were younger. Half my lifetime ago I was turning 17. That's crazy to me. I can still remember it so vividly. I was only 16 when I finished school, and that summer I turned 17, and I have such visceral memories of so many things from that summer. And one of the things I remember from that summer was reading a lot and not knowing what came next, but being okay and happy within that sphere. Around that time, some of my favourite books were, you'll notice a theme potentially, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, and the book that I'm planning to reread for this blog is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. I haven't read this book since I was a teenager. What I'm planning to do is to reread this book. It's quite short. Look, this is my original copy and everything. I'm really looking forward to delving back into it, to seeing how I feel about it from the perspective of an adult. I know that this book was written from the perspective of some boys about a family of 5 sisters. These boys were obsessed with this family, just couldn't get enough of these girls, found them incredibly enigmatic, mysterious. What we know quite quickly is that these girls have all died by suicide, and this is their story. This is their story, but it's told from the perspective of the boys in the neighbourhood. So I'm looking forward to delving into this and to see how I read it differently now. So I'm going to sign out here and get cracking, and I'll check in with you soon. It's me again, and I have utterly failed at this reading vlog because I recorded that intro on Monday evening and it is now Wednesday evening, and I haven't actually started the book properly. That is the plan for this evening. So first though, I have been out for a really long walk, and it was much warmer out than I expected, and I wasn't quite dressed for the season, shall we say. You're lucky that you're not watching Smell-O-Vision because I probably stink. So I'm gonna go make myself some dinner, and by make myself some dinner I'm reheating some leftover curry and frying some leftover potatoes and making some salad. After that then I need to give myself a scrub-a-dub-dub because I'm disgusting, and then I'm gonna lie down and start my book. Okay, so we're fed, we are watered, we are showered, we are dried, and we are dressed. And we're willing to put down the 2 other books that we're reading to finally get cracking on this baby. Just in case you're wondering, I'm reading Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I started listening to Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, so I'm about just over 2 hours in. But anyway, enough distracting myself. Read the book, Aisling. Wednesday morning. I read like 72 pages of my book last night. So this morning, first I went for an owl iced coffee, treated myself, you know yourself. Then I brought my little doggy for a walk. So if you hear some panting, it's because she's bet. She's like nearly 15, so taking her for a walk is it's a whole thing. She enjoys it, but she can't go very far, and then she's worn out afterwards. So it's kind of like a balance between her mental health and her physical health. Something I think we're all trying to balance a little. But now I'm back and I'm gonna just update you a little bit on my books. So as I said, I loved this book when I was like 17 and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I think I've read it twice before, but I haven't actually read it definitely since my teens. Basically, it's set in like a suburban neighborhood. It's narrated by a group of boys or potentially men. We don't really know from what time perspective they're coming from, but it's after the fact anyway. But what's interesting about the narrative is it's told from the perspective of a we. So we did this, we saw that, we spoke to. So it's not like a singular person perspective, which is interesting. So this group of boys anyway, they are obsessed with these Lisbon sisters. So there are 5 girls in the Lisbon family, and they seem to almost like look at them as some sort of like divinity or something really special. And maybe that's because the girls are kind of never really allowed to socialize. They kind of stick to themselves. They seem maybe like they might be quite pious. Their parents are very religious, Catholic of course. They're brought to mass, and kind of everybody else in the neighborhood kind of watches them from afar with like a little bit of awe, maybe a little bit of trepidation. What I do remember about the book is it's kind of set in summer, at least in the beginning anyway, and there's something very heavy and very thick about the atmosphere. There are fish flies, I think they're called, and they're kind of dead and they're coating everything. There's mention of fungus in the trees, there's mention of dirt, there's mention of grime. There's a very heavy kind of oppressive feeling about the environment. What I didn't remember about the book is that the prose is very sharp. It's like Jeffrey Eugenides, I will give it to him. He knows how to spin a sentence. He knows how to kind of bring satire into a really difficult situation. So this book, now I will say, was published in 1993 for the first time. So it was set, I think, in the 60s or 70s maybe at the time, but it was published in 1993. So it's 30 years old, and there are parts in which you can kind of feel that. One thing I will mention is there are obvious trigger warnings. This book is about girls who die by suicide. I don't know if I mentioned that or if I just assumed it was obvious. So it's quite gruesome. The author didn't shy back from, there's my dad coming in, the author didn't shy away from kind of the gruesomeness of what's happening here with these sisters. One thing I did notice is that yes, it's told from the perspective of a group of boys, but there is a scene in which another boy with intellectual disabilities is brought in and they call him the R word repeatedly. I'm conflicted because this is what happened and this is what would have happened and this is the way they would have spoken, but also it's a really terrible word. None of us should be using it to refer to anybody or to anything. This really kind of mythologizes suburbia as well. It brings a focus to kind of the everyday, the smaller details, the stories that we tell each other within a community, the gossip, how things grow legs, how stories grow legs. And then after the first girl dies, you see everybody kind of just mythologizing this girl again, and everybody tries to feel important within her story even though nobody really knew her. Oh, I did this with her once, I said hi to her once, like, and everybody maybe kind of feeling like, oh well, I could have been her savior or something, but that was never the case. She was kind of put on this pedestal and nobody really spoke to her all that much. How overwhelming a community can be and how oppressive a community can be as well, even though they're standing away. I just read this book as a kid. I didn't really think about it too much, I guess. This story is kind of pieced together through memory and through gossip and through he said and she said, and sometimes I'm reading it and I'm like, how did they get that information? And we're told that they were speaking to this person or that person, and I'm like, would it really have been all that realistic that that person would have actually openly spoken about what was going on and what happened? And I don't know, maybe people just thought about what went on during this time and it was just something people wanted to speak about, but there were some perspectives that they got the information from that I'm like, I don't know. So far, I'm quite enjoying it. It is bleak. It's also quite funny in parts. This book isn't going to be for everybody, and I find it strange that it's having such a resurgence at the moment all of a sudden, I guess, through Book Talk, Bookstagram, and of course good old BookTube. It's a weird thing going back into it because I can remember 2006, the summer of 2006. It's kind of like bringing it back to me, and it feels really far away. Looking forward to reading a bit more of that today. Myself and my partner Sean are going to like a spoken word event this evening. So we've been to one before. They're kind of emceed by a Dublin poet, a spoken word poet named Stephen James Smith. I have mentioned him before. He's great. It's kind of like an open mic event. Also, it's kind of more structured where they have like a particular guest. That's my day and my evening, so I'll check in with you soon when I've read a little bit more. It just started absolutely spitting rain out of nowhere. When I had Sally out for a walk, it was like really sunny. So welcome to Irish summer. I'm gonna make a little bit of lunch now. Like significantly overestimate the amount of salad I can fit in a wrap. Use your exhale to actively relax the shoulders down. Hello pals. So actually been a while since I've checked in. I think the last time I actually spoke to you was on Thursday before I went to that spoken word event, the poetry event. That was really good. I'm just going to mention a poet called Abby Oliveira. She was the special guest, and if you like spoken word poetry, I would definitely recommend checking her out. And so I didn't really read a whole lot of the Virgin Suicides over the weekend. I just was reading my other stuff on Saturday and went out for dinner with some friends then Saturday night, and then yesterday you will probably have seen I went for a lovely walk along the coast down in Rosslare, near enough to where I live, and then when I came home I just basically spent the day finishing off I think the rest of the 150 pages that I had left in this book. And so as I had mentioned before, I was really obsessed with this book when I was 17, half my lifetime ago. I think with age my reading of it has really changed. I'm not going to get too much more into the plot because I don't want to give any spoilers, but there's a lot of foreshadowing in this, and you know kind of right from the get-go that these girls are all going to die by suicide. One thing I do notice within this book is the phrase commit suicide. Like, it kind of connotes like back in the day when suicide was a mortal sin and also a crime, and you'd be committing a crime. I just don't like this idea of still using the phrase commit suicide, because people are dying by suicide. It's an illness. It's not a crime. You go out. You're not a criminal mastermind. Times have changed, so I'm not going to go on about that too much, but I don't like that. Also, I will say there was also the use of the N-word in this book. Again, it was relating to how the young boys spoke at the time, and it was the name of something that they engaged with. I can't even remember what it was, but I just remember being like... So anyway, all of that aside is to say, right, I finished this book yesterday, so when I picked it back up, we were moving from summer into autumn, and one thing that was really interesting was to see the change in the environment and how the house was used as this visual representation of what was going on inside, how the family were coping or not coping, and how things are going on. The seasons kind of coincided with that a little bit again, but then we come back into spring and things seem like they might be picking up, and I feel like this book is so much about the horror of the mundane and the idea of the gaze and just our obsession with happiness, and then this freakishness that we believe comes with being otherwise, while actually most of us are probably not terribly happy. I think there are probably a lot more people that veer toward unhappiness a lot of the time, not to be a cynic or anything, but we're all chasing this happiness and like putting on this happy front and aren't I great, but like there's this horror that comes with that, and this brings to mind for me this idea of this big smile while actually being horrendously petrified or depressed on the inside. And again, I'm kind of ranting a bit, but I've just been thinking today about our obsession with being happy and putting happiness forward regardless of whether or not we're happy. I just noticed again in this book, like there's this superficiality of the gaze. So these boys are telling these girls stories, and it's from their perspective, from their gaze. So all of the things that they put forward. So the boys, all of the things that they imagine, all of the connotations that they put onto these girls. So these girls never get to tell their story, but also then as the reader we are gazing upon this gaze, and it gets a bit meta. These girls are just almost like symbols of blankness, so they come to be what the neighborhood wants them to be, what the boys want them to be, what everyone expects them to be. And there's this idea then of blame, of guilt, of shame, of I don't know, it's just these girls never get to be these girls. They're always a symbol of something, this inevitability that people think, oh, well, your mental illness is a curse and it's almost like it's contagious, like these elm trees. So I think the elm trees also kind of, these girls, again, because most of the neighborhood just allow their trees to be cut down because they're miserable, and they kind of expect these girls to maybe die as well. And I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling here, but there's just so much within this really short book. Like it's only about 250 pages, so it's given me a lot to think about in these short few pages. Thanks, Oscar. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did when I was younger. I found a lot of the time I was kind of wanting to skim. Like there's a lot of he said, she said, which is fine because it fits into kind of the telling of the story and the way the story is told and the language of the story. But at the same time, I felt quite detached, and I guess there is that detachment because we're not getting the girls' stories from their perspective again. So I do think it's quite a cleverly written book. I do think it's quite a dated book. I think it's an interesting one to think about, I will say that, but I don't know that I would say that I enjoyed it as much as you can enjoy a book that's kind of about this subject matter. Thank you. But I gave it 3 stars, which is to say that it wasn't the 5-star read that I remembered it being. And I was glad when it was over. But also I'm thinking about it a lot today, and really about this idea of telling your own story and the importance of telling your own story rather than somebody else doing it for you. Whether you refuse to tell your story, which is fine, but many people are just not allowed to tell their stories. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I'm glad that I reread it because it's just been sitting on my shelf so long. The pages have been yellowing and ow, you're such a nuisance of a cat. I love you. Those are kind of my thoughts on that. I wouldn't really say that I recommend reading it for like enjoyment's sake, but just for some interesting concepts, I think it's worth a read. I'm gonna leave it there, and I'm gonna thank you for watching, and I'm gonna give Oscar lots of love because she's clearly craving somebody to give her a bit of petting. Thank you so much for sticking with me if you're still here, and thanks so much for being here as ever, just in general. And I hope you're minding yourself. I hope you're doing well. And if you like this content, please do subscribe. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.